Yes, now we begin with the first session this morning. It's a very, very interesting one. Well, in keeping with the innovation and digitalization theme of the Bharat FinTech Summit, we're beginning with a speaker session dedicated to the topic API benchmarking, getting open banking initiative right. And our speaker for this session is Mr. Vikrant Kulkarni, Principal Consultant, The Digital Fifth. Let's welcome him here on stage. Mr. Vikrant, welcome, sir.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Vikrant here. Yeah. I work with Digital Fifth as a principal consultant, and prior to my background, I have been, at the starting, I have been started my journey as a developer, and then eventually got into implementation, and then into consulting roles. So, development is very close to my heart. Till now, I choose to work on the APIs and understand how they are working, how they are being used. And the topic is related to that only, right? During the journey, identify it's not just me. There are a lot of, you can say, enthusiasts in the organization who does that, right? So I've been encountered with one of the business consulting partner there. So he was talking about the how the APIs can be improved, how the end experience can be built based on that, and how the improvisation can happen. So it has reached to that level. So it is not a tech session at all now, right? It has reached to a level, right, where everyone understands that it is a backbone of many systems which are being built today. So open banking is one of the what you can say outcome of adoption of APIs. If you see many of the products which we use day-to-day life, or the apps which you say, like if I want to take the example of UPI. So UPI is full of all the APIs, right? In UPI, the primary base of UPI was it has to be built on APIs only. Uh, then later on, if I talk about the other non-financial applications, so you can take Swiggy, Uber, everything is made of APIs, right? So now coming back to the part of how does this API benchmarking will help, because if you see in specific to open banking in the banking technology, uh, there are almost services are very much similar. If there is a bank transfer, there is a bank transfer. It is going to debit one account, it is going to credit one account. Then what the API will do, what differentiator the API will bring into the picture. So that is something which has been considered as a part of API benchmarking. So the journeys, if you see, are very much different, right? So now, okay, anybody, if out of you have been accessed any of the developer portal, you would have, you will be able to relate me what I am trying to tell, right? So I go to developer portal, I try to register myself, nothing happens, okay? At some places, there are few examples where people are doing very well into that. I go register there, registration happens, but it goes for the approval in the backend. So somebody will approve me. Then I'll get the access. So again, broken journey there for the developer, right? So just try to imagine this journey is not, we are not building for the customers, we are building it for the developers who can be potential customer, because those are from the any fintech companies, or they can be any potential partnership perspective, right? But at some places I found it very interesting thing, right? I've registered myself on one of the developer portal. I got a call next day stating that you have registered, you have access our developer portal. Are you trying to figure out something? Can I help you? So, that is a fabulous experience, right? Everybody would look at. And even I was, they offered me a call with their manager as well, development manager as well, so that I will be able to relate it to my use case. So the things are reaching out to that level. So now when we say any of the APIs which are launching, so I have 300 APIs, I have 400 APIs, doesn't matter. Nobody knows what are those, right? And how they are going to be used. So unless they know how they are going to be used, it is very much difficult for anyone to figure out that what to do with those 300 APIs. Simple example I will give you. Everybody knows this sound box, right? Which is there at every vendor. Wherever you pay with UPI or any other wallet, now you get the sound there as well, right? So is this something which new has happened into the into what you can say into the framework of UPI for that? Nothing. It was already there. The way it was coming to you as a notification, that same response API has been used to generate a sound, so that the small person the person who is on the roads or may not get the time to see the messages and the notification will save his time, right? Similarly, if you guys know about Penny Drop is one of the API of IMPS which we used to do use earlier. So if you see the IMPS payment system as of its what you can say as of its birth state as well, it has that capability. But nobody visualized how it can be used, because we were bracketed into something that it is going to be used like this only. So we started using like this only. Somebody tried to see that. Somebody mixed that with the some sense that it can be used for the verification of the name of the customer as well, and then the thing started going on. So that's how this APIs does help a lot. I had some talk about developer portal and APIs also. Now we'll try to focus more on the benchmarking side. So why do we do benchmarking? Like I was saying, everywhere if you see, the APIs are very much common. So you don't get to see any different API. So the example of fund transfer we talked about, it's the same. IMPS API, it's the same. But the use case which was been built on top of that is something has changed, that IMPS 1 rupee ka fund transfer to penny drop. So that's how it can be improved upon. The another thing is competitive edge, right? So if you can take any of the institution up, you will see on their website and everywhere that we have 300 APIs, we have 200 APIs. Okay, categorizing those APIs, making them in proper structure and presenting them back to the user is something which is currently lacking everywhere. So it's still catching up. But that is something which is helps you to stand different from others. If I want to talk about operational excellence, so how many, how this API can be scaled, okay? Is there any scope for scalability? How the structure has been put in? Are the adoption of the cloud or any of the such flexibility solutions are there? Is the internal structure is microservices based? Is something which helps you to gauge that. So whenever you are doing a API benchmarking for your organization, for anyone, these are the few things which you need to consider. The experience is largely from the perspective of what I talked about. When you try to get new customer on board, here the customer, what we are talking about, the partners basically, who wants to use your API. So you will try to see that whether they are being treated properly, and they are also being treated as a customer. So if I want to take the example of, say, account aggregator API. So if you try to search for the account aggregator API, very detailed documentation is available. You will be able to see everything what you want. Even it is the same for the ONDC. And that is what is helping for the ecosystem to build something on top of that. So that is one of the major component which needs to be considered as why should we do the API benchmarking. So what are the key focus areas that should be considered is like performance metrics. So performance metrics wise, it will be like how the API is performing, right? What are the error rates are there? What is the you can say the response time is there? So typically what we call as a TAT. So that TAT has to be measured. You can put the security standards as also one of the point. That is the latest API security. All the security parameters have been considered. It can be two-way SSL based, or it can be authentication layer on top of that. So that is something that needs to be considered. As a part of regulatory adherence, are the data sharing and cyber security policies are being implemented or not? So that has also can be done. The customer satisfaction is definitely, which is the user, the way I was talking about earlier, once the customer is satisfied and he is getting to see the, what you can say, a simplistic way to adopt those API sets, it will definitely help them. And of course, the innovation and journeys which can be built on top of that. So these are the key focus areas that should be considered as a part of building APIs benchmarking parameters. Yeah. So, what is currently been utilized with those API sets, and what are the things which have been developed now? The growth in the open banking is there right now. If you see many of the applications or many of the what you can say, many of the interfaces which have been built, those are based on APIs, and those are largely, you can take the examples of like neo banking solution, or it can be cross banking solutions. It can be your the interoperable products like UPI, etc. Everything is built on the API. So any financial institution should have the base of APIs with them. So it can be I mean, there are different business models per se. So if I want to take like B2B to C business model, it will be like bank, fintech, and then customer. Similarly, there are B2B2B2C models are there, right? So there is a bank, there is a fintech which has built a layer on top of that, like BaaS players. On top of that, any of the fintech have built some interface layer, which is presentation layer for the customer, and then you will have the customer at the end. So different layers are getting built on top of that. So considering that, you should have that, what you can say, different layers which have been considered, and those are also has to be supported by each of the layer in the similar way. Improvisation in API security. So if you see the security of API has been one of the biggest concern which you have, because it is something like which are where you are directly interfacing to another system, right? So in that case, the security does a major role play into that. So it can be having the two-way SSL or authentication, client ID authentication. So there are multiple ways to do that. So the stress is more on that, that how should we pick that up and how should we get that delivered to the end customers per se. Hybrid and cloud native architecture. So now if you see, I mean, as per API says, there are different layers of the API, right? So each of the API will have different scale which will be required. So there are some of the APIs which just required you to take the input and process something. Some of the APIs are information API. Some of the APIs are just a callback APIs, etc. But throughput of each API has to be different. So while designing the API framework, this has to be considered that how this can be built accordingly, so that it will be able to support for the growth or the scalability. Considering that now cloud adoption has been there. I mean, there are a lot of, you can say even banks have started adopting the cloud. So maybe in next section we'll also talk more about it. So I'll not stretch at of now. So virtualization and containerization is at the peak, right? So when we say containerization, what does it help is, it helps you to build a CI/CD pipeline, right? Where you can do the continuous implementation, because the way changes are being introduced in the market currently, be it regulatory changes or be it customer requirements or changing the dynamics of the business. Considering that, you should have a proper setup which can support you to continuously implement something, continuously implement those changes and put those changes for the customers and get it going, right? So now, say suppose if there is something which is new has been introduced into the market, so considering one of the new offerings which the competitive industry has put in, and if you are not putting on your application, it will be then you are then late entrant into the market. So largely the we can say the major pie will be taken by the one who is there in the first, right? Everyone knows whom I am talking about, right? So that way, the containerization is something which is coming into the market. So many of the, I mean, I won't talk much about the fintechs because they are more lenient towards adopting new technologies. But even in the banks, there are implementation of Kubernetes and others have been adopted now. So that is also changing a lot, right? So ERP connectivity is largely wanted to talk about the connected banking solutions. So the solutions where you will have the front end which is provided from different provider, and then the back end is supported by the bank's API. So that is something which is getting built upon more. You will see another name I could take for it is embedded finance. Embedded finance is something which is increasing a lot, right? If say suppose you are using Ola. So Ola is typically a taxi booking app, right? But you are able to get the loan out there. So that has been supported by the APIs of the banks which have been given. If you take the example of money control, typical example of money control. In money control, it's actually basically that is app for the news and the updates related to share market. But there you are able to book the FD now, right? So now, how does this happens? Because in the back end, if you see, there are layers which have been there, right? So there will be money control as a facing app, but there will be banks in the back end who has hosted those APIs, who have been adopted by the money control on top of that. So this embedded finance products are being utilized now more and more, and the ease of user to do one thing at one point of time is pretty much pushing that to the market, right? Now, largely anybody would like the journeys which we used to do earlier. Say, suppose when you try to book something and do the payment, you will click on the pay, then you will be redirected to the one of the screen, which will be totally different from the earlier screen. Then you will enter something, then you will get some message, then OTP, then etc. So those journeys have gone, right? Now, if you see, there are single or two-click journeys only. You will directly either get, app-to-app call at certain places, or even if you enter the card details, it will be there into. So there are introduction of headless SDKs have been there. So where the customer experience remains same, but in the backend, whatever changes has to be done, those changes are been pushed as a part of the SDK. API aggregator banking as a service model is one of the emerging model. So there are largely players in the market who are providing all the APIs, banking APIs as a service. So typically we are call them BaaS players. So BaaS. So BaaS players are there. So those are also then diverted. You can bifurcate them into like payment as a service providers or lending as a service providers. So these services, these providers are going to be come into the market because they are simplifying the experience for the end customers who are adopting those APIs. So a very weird thing here, right? So a bank has those APIs. Those APIs have been adopted by the BaaS players, and those are been provided to the fintech. So many of the times that where we were having the discussion, the question was why banks itself cannot give those APIs directly to the fintech, right? Because there is another fintech in between. So what is the role of that player? So that player plays a very crucial role of, you can say, emerging two different cultures also. Not just the API. If I want to talk about technology is one of the thing, but if you try to have a conversation with either of them, they will be using different languages. So this player who is in between helps them to understand both the languages and helps them to build something on top of that. So that way BaaS players are emerging, and that need is going to be there. Both are interdependent, and when the embedded finance come into the picture, you should have players who are supporting like the BaaS or PaaS players. Yeah. So typically, what are the API suites which are been developed by the banks? Like you will have the bank, you will have neobanks or the consumer and customer businesses where this directly APIs can be pushed upon. Say suppose current account, savings account are the typical APIs which have been developed, where the savings account you will have the current account for businesses and bank reconciliation APIs. In the payments and collections, you will have APIs largely about a payment gateway. So typically, these are the sets which largely every financial institution who is active into the active into the open banking or the API banking segment would have this. Yeah. So some suits, I mean, these are the few examples which are built on top of that. I mean, I was talking about the VAS players. So those have been used as one of the layer in between by these apps to build something. Likewise, I have took the example of money control as one of the examples. So it can be NIVIO Neo as well, right? It can be FIBE. So if you can see, these are typically into the different segments. I mean, there are some of the apps which are largely from the consumer segment, some of them from the business segment, but both are trying to utilize these services. Yeah. So what are our parameters that needs to be looked as a part of API benchmarking? So we know that now that the need is there to do this benchmarking, but what are the typically parameters that we should look at it? So first, I had talked about the portal experience, right? So when you build any developer portal experience, how is the experience for that developer there? So that is something which you need to see. How the navigation and the user experience is there, right? So for example, in portal, I have 300 APIs, but those are written one by one or alphabetical order. It's of no use, right? The categorization has to be proper categorization. Say suppose if there are certain APIs which I can use to create to create a say savings account, those should be bundled so that I'll get an idea that boss, these are the APIs which I needs to be followed. But typically what has been done, these are the 300 APIs, do what you want to do. But that is not going to be helpful. The detailing and process should be there. At least user should know that what are the steps will be from here. Say for example, if developer is approaching a developer portal and trying to build something, he'll come to know that this is the first stage where I'm getting access to the sandbox. Then I'll have some introduction with the persons and of the one who is hosting these APIs, and then I'll get into some agreements. Then I'll have the UAT setup. Then I'll have the production setup post the testing. So at least that journey should be visible somewhere for the user. User here, even developer, to understand that how these steps are going to be taken. Yeah. On the API level side, so there has to be proper documentation, format, flowcharts for the journeys, right? So you get the, say, a simple example bata raha hu aapko. So I have gotten, at one point of time, we accessed one developer portal, we got the fund transfer API. So we used it to build something into the application. But later on, we came to know that that is not the first step. First, we'll have to generate the token, use that token into the application, and do some authentication, and then call that API. But as a third person who is not part of the organization will not come to know about this flow. So you have to mention that clearly into your document, which will help someone to build something on top of that. Yeah, so on market level, so it has to be, the understanding of the bank or the financial or the API host architecture has to be considered, because that is only going to give you the throughput. Say suppose if I have good amount of APIs which are there, but the backend system or the architecture is not which is supporting that, then I may not be able to get the proper throughput which I want to get, right? So then that part has to be considered very clearly into that. The client experience and feedback, and a few of the security features also, which are the security features have been implemented, what are the things that needs to be done, right? I cannot have the situation where I'll start utilizing those APIs and suddenly I get the what you can say, request from the API hosted institution stating that you will have to have ISO 27001 certification. But this thing was never mentioned earlier. And what happens is that these things delays the processes. So typically when the benchmarking has been done, these are the things which are been considered. So how we do it, like we have adopted the flow, like where we'll mention about the considering the this is API bank APIs related to banks. Then each of the bank, on the bank level certain parameters have been considered. On API level, on market level certain parameters have been considered. Yeah. So it has to be supported by the strategic planning. The clear objective of open banking initiative has to be there if you want to get it right. It not just like, I mean, everybody is putting up API, so let us adopt it and let us start our API set as well. So that should not be there. Understand the target markets where you want to enter and services that needs to be offered. Also, the key performance indicators should be clearly called out. So here, key performance indicators would be like how many partnerships you have closed is the one thing, but what you have done with those partnerships, how you have flourished those partnerships, are you maintaining those partnerships as it is, are you building the experiences which are apt for those partnerships or not? That is something needs to be taken care of. Yeah. So that's it from my side. If no, we can reach out on LinkedIn also. We can get connected. I can help you out if something is required. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vikrant, sir.